Hi, my name's Stuart Lynch, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to Lottie 4. And Lottie 4 is Airbnb's cross-platform open source library for rendering vector motion graphics. Lottie is used extensively at Airbnb and also powers animations in thousands of other apps throughout the industry. So in this video, I'll take you through my learning process for building a UIViewRepresentable so you can easily implement Lottie animations into your SwiftUI apps. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. Lottie 4 is a new rendering engine with significant performance improvements powered by core animations under the hood. When you get your own Lottie account, you can search for and obtain hundreds of animations that will enhance your app's appearance and improve your user's experience. I have a starter project for this video, and I recommend that you download it and work along with me, because in the end you'll have a reusable struct that you can apply to your own projects. I'll leave a link in the description. The starter app is pretty simple. There is a tab view with 3 views. On this first tab, I have a button that, when pressed, displays the boring progress view for 5 seconds, and then it disappears. I want to replace this progress view with a Lottie animation that you'll see in just a second. On the second tab, I have a button that just increments a score up to 5 from 0, and then resets it back to 0 again and starts all over. Once I reach 5, however, I want to shower the view with some confetti, and that will be another Lottie animation. And the third tab is a list of fictitious posts with a like button. Currently, when I tap on the heart button, it fades from open to fill, or back again. And I want this to be a more spectacular appearance when we like something. Again, another Lottie animation. To get Lottie animations, you'll need to create an account at Lottie Files. I'll leave a link in the description. Don't be put off by the pricing tab. There is a basic free plan that gives you access to an unlimited number of public files. For example, if we search for progress, we can find all sorts of ones. I'm going to use this one here. And if you click on it, you'll be able to download the file, and it's simply a JSON file that you can add to your project's bundle. I've already done that in the sample project, so you don't even need to create an account for this tutorial. Some other ones that I'll be using are these stars instead of that progress view. And eventually, we'll even use this chicken. For our celebration view, we'll use this confetti animation so that it'll spread this confetti over our entire view. And for our likes view, we'll explode that heart into this display when we like a post. Are you ready to go? Well, the first thing you'll need to do is to install the Swift package. If you visit the Lottie iOS GitHub page, you'll find a link to the Swift package and instructions, and I'll leave a link in the description as well. All you have to do is copy that link, and then open your starter project. From the Files menu, choose Add Packages, and then paste the copied URL into the search box and choose Add Package. Once that URL has been resolved, choose Add Package once more, and it gets added to your project. Let's start with our Add Progress view. This is a SwiftUI app, but unfortunately the Lottie package is for UIKit. This isn't really a problem, however, because we can easily create a UIViewRepresentable to add Lottie animations to our SwiftUI projects. I have an entire video on this topic, and I'll leave a link in the description, but I'll walk you through it here. I want to show you my learning process here as I built my own version, so I hope you bear with me as I do this and learn something in return. First, create a new file called LottieView. Change the import to SwiftUI and add another one for Lottie. Next, create a new struct called LottieView that conforms to the UIViewRepresentable protocol. I'll let Xcode add the type alias for me, and then I'll specify it to be a Lottie animation view. Xcode again will generate a warning that I can use to fix by adding the view protocol stubs. And then I can remove the type alias as it's no longer needed. It's been applied. Now, I won't be adding anything to the update UI views now, so let's remove that placeholder. We'll need to return a Lottie animation view in the Make UI view. So let's create an instance by using the initializer that requires that we provide a name. Now I'm going to use the blue progress dots. That was the first one I showed you. And it must represent a file that you have uploaded to your app bundle. You can see I have all 5 of the ones that I showed you earlier downloaded and uploaded here. And one of them is named blue progress dots. Next, we'll need to play the animation using the animation views play function, and then return the animation view. If I return now to the Add Progress view, I'll replace the SwiftUI Progress view there with our new Lottie view. When I tap the Show Process button, the animation plays, but it only plays once in that 5-second interval. So let's return to our Lottie view and fix that. First, I don't always want to display that same animation, so let me add a property that we can specify when we create our instance of our Lottie view. So we'll create a name that is a string property. And then to override the default loop mode for our animation of playing only once, we can create another property called loop mode that is of type Lottie loop mode. And then where we create our animation view, we can change this to be the Lottie animation view with the name that we provide when we create our instance. Then we can apply the loop mode that we specify also on creation to the animations view's loop mode property. Back in our view, we'll need to add those 2 arguments when we create the Lottie view. Now for the name, I could use that same string for our blue process dots, but to avoid typos, I've created a constants enum that has static properties for each of the 5 different animations that I've uploaded. Now I can simply type constant followed by a period and pick the corresponding one. For the loop mode then, if I type period, I see my options, and the default one is the play once, but what I want is loop. And I'll leave it up to you to explore the other ones. Now our loop continues and plays for the entire 5-second duration. Let's change the animation for our stars animation. Let me adjust the size by setting a frame where the width is just 100. Well, that looks better, but as you'll see shortly, it's not reliable. Let's switch back to blue dots. Now, if we want to speed up or slow down our animation, we can specify an animation speed, which is a CG float. So that's another property that we'll need to apply to our UIViewRepresentable's animation view. So back in our Lottie view, we'll add a new animation speed property of that CG float type. Then in Make UI View, we'll specify that to the animations view's animation speed property. So if I return back to our view, let's add that argument and specify an animation of 3. Well, that's pretty fast now. Everything is working pretty well, but in many cases I want to have default values specified, like the animation speed or the loop mode, for example, without having to specify it, but still having the option of overriding it. We can do this by returning to our Lottie view and creating an initializer for all of those properties. And then in that initializer, we can specify what we want as the default. Now I won't have a default name. That has to be created and specified on each instance. But for the loop mode, let's say I want it always to be defaulted to play once. For animation speed, let's always have it default to 1. And then we can apply those values from the initializer's parameters to the corresponding struct's properties. If I return now to the view and remove all those arguments except for the name, we'll see that the speed is 1, but it plays only once in that 5-second interval. So in this case, we'll need to add loop mode so that we can override the default loop mode. So let's specify that as loop. Now, as I mentioned, that frame isn't always reliable, as you can see here as I change our frame. As an alternative to specifying a frame, we can use a scale effect, like this. Let's specify a scale effect of 0.6. Or 0.3. And you can see that our view scales nicely. Let's try some different scales for the stars animation. Let's switch back to blue dots and a scale of 0.6, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. Moving on to our celebration view now, we want to overlay our confetti animation over this entire view when our increment reaches 5. So to do this, I'm going to embed the V stack inside a Z stack. And as the second item, I'll use the Lottie view using the constants confetti. And we can use that default of playing once with the animation speed of 1, so we don't need to specify those. Well, it plays immediately, which is not what we want, so we'll need to fix that. It does play once, however, which is good, but it doesn't cover the entire view. So let's try to fix that covering of the view by adding an ignore safe area to the Lottie view. But it still doesn't go to the top. Let's try adding ignore safe area to the V stack. And that's worse. I've tried a number of different locations and nothing seems to work. And what we've come across is a limitation to our Lottie view UIViewRepresentable for this use case. Even if we were satisfied with the coverage, the play button might still be an issue. So we're going to take a different approach in creating our UIViewRepresentable. And instead of creating a Lottie view, we're going to create a regular UI view, and that'll give us more control. So return to your Lottie view and copy the entire contents of that Lottie view. Now let's create a new file called Lottie plus view and paste that entire copied code into that file, but change the struct name from Lottie view to Lottie plus view. So right now it's exactly the same. But in our two functions where we use our Lottie animation view, we're going to change that to be simply a UI view. Now I'm going to create a new property called animation view, which is going to be of type Lottie animation view at the top of our struct. Then in our initializer, after we assign the name, we can create the Lottie animation view using that name. And now this will create our animation view upon initialization, so instead of creating it in our make UI view, we can remove it from there. Then instead of an animation view, we'll need a simple UI view. So we can create one called view by specifying a frame of .0. By doing this, then we can specify our frame accurately when we create the instance. But to do that, we'll need to add our animation view as a subview of the view. Well, this is all programmatic UIKit stuff that you as SwiftUI developers normally don't have to worry about. But the other thing that we'll need to do is programmatically specify how we want our animation view to fit within the view. So we'll need to tell the view to ignore the normal constraints by setting the translate auto resizing mask to constraints to false. And then we can specify our own by setting the height anchor of our animation view to be constrained to that which is equal to the view's height anchor and make it active. And then we can do exactly the same with the width anchor. So with our view created and our animation view as a subview, and with our constraints all specified, we can now just return the view. With that set, then we can specify a frame or set ignore safe area on a UI view, and it will behave properly. So if we return now to our view, we can change this now to a Lottie plus view. And our animation is now constrained within the safe areas at both the top and the bottom. Now I want to be able to specify if this view will be displayed as an aspect fit or an aspect fill. So we'll need a new property in our Lottie plus view. So let's go there, and I'm going to call it content mode and specify it as a type that is a UI view content mode. So we'll need to add that to our initializer then, and if we provide a default, we'll only need to override it if we don't like the default. So let's just say for the default, we'll call it scale aspect fit. And then we'll need to assign that to our property. And then in make UI view, we'll need to specify that the animation view's content mode is this value as well. So back in our view, we can update the call site by specifying our override to be a scale aspect fill for this case. And we're almost there. We can add the ignore safe area to the Z stack. Now it fills the screen entirely, which is what I want. But what about that play on demand? Well, we'll need a binding to some Boolean value. So it will play only if we tap the button and our increment goes to 5, and then we set the binding to true. So in the celebration view, we'll create a Boolean state property called play and initialize it as false. Then I'm just going to change the if clause to simply if the score is equal to 5, will play is equal to true. And then we'll handle the setting of the play back to false in our Lottie view. So in the Lottie plus view, we'll need a new binding property and be able to initialize it, but we want it to be true by default, so our other views will play automatically. So create this after the content mode. Then in the initializer, at the end, we'll require that play, that's a binding for a bool. And then we can specify that we normally want it to play immediately, so we'll specify it a constant of true. And then in the body of our initializer, we'll assign to a binding by using the underscore before the play. Well, the issue now is that we can't play when the view is made. We'll need to be able to update the view when the button is tapped and the binding to our state property is changed. So in the update view, we'll need to do a conditional check. So if play, within the if clause then, we can use the animation view's play function that has a completion block. Then holding the option key on the keyboard, it will allow us to select the additional options where they are currently gray. Well, this completion handler will get executed when the animation has completed. So once it has played once, we'll want to set the play back to false. We can test this back in the call site by adding a binding to play when presenting the Lottie plus view. You would think that this should work now, but the view is completely overlaying our button, so we can't tap our button. So we'll need to disable the hit testing on this animation view. So that should work, right? Well, when we test it, we tap to see the score increment, but it doesn't play at 5, so something is wrong. Well, I struggled with this for quite a while, and I discovered that when I remove this text view here and then did my incrementation from 0 to 5, the animation plays. So what's going on? That view somehow isn't getting rendered when I've got another text view that's being changed. So my question was answered by the product manager at Lottie Files for me. And the issue is that when the view is updated, our Lottie view also needs to be re-rendered as well. So we can do that by assigning an ID to the Lottie view that will change every time the score is incremented. So I can use that score as the value for my ID because it's hashable. And while we're at it, we can also double the animation speed to speed up that confetti falling. So let's uncomment the text view and see if it works now. I'll increment and it's going to go from 0 to 5. And once it reaches 5, the confetti explodes over our view. Perfect. Now on to the final and hopefully practical example. I'd like to add an animation over the heart that whenever it's tapped and the post.isLike is updated to true, we get an explosion of hearts. So first let's introduce a state object for play again, and we'll set it to false as we did in the celebration view. Then in the button's action, let's create an if clause to check if not post is liked. And then in that case, we'll toggle the like, and then we'll play the animation. Otherwise, we'll just do that fade out to the unliked version within an animation block there. Now we want that animation to overlay the heart to be fairly limited in its frame. And we only want to play that animation only over that particular heart that is being tapped. So we'll need to know which one that is. Well, as it turns out, we have a post that has a unique ID, so that when we tap on the button, we can store that. So we'll create a new state property called selectedPostID and initialize it with a UUID, which is what our post uses. And you can see that here in our like post model. Now, in our button action, once we've toggled the isLiked, we can set play to true and then assign the iterated post ID to the selected post ID. And then we can create an overlay over our entire button with an alignment of center. Within that overlay then, which is over every button in the list, we can check to see if the selected post ID is the one that we tapped on, the iterated post ID. And then within there, we'll create our Lottie Plus view. Well, the name is going to be the constants.cascade like. And remember, our loop mode is set to play once, so we don't need to specify that here. I am going to give an animation speed of 4 though to speed that up. And then I'm going to set the content mode to override the fit to fill. And then I'll bind it to our state play property. I also want to limit this explosion of hearts within a square, so I can apply a frame with a width and height of 50. And then finally, once the view has been overlaid, it's going to be blocking the button below, so we'll need to set the allows hit testing to false. And since we're setting the ID in the button, this underlying view will be updated, forcing the overlay to update as well whenever the selected post ID is changed. So we don't need to do anything more in this case. That's it. As you can see, every time we tap a like, the heart explodes. Well, we have 2 different Lottie views now, but we really don't need both. If I go back to our first Add Progress view, we can see if we can use our new one, our more powerful version here. Indeed we can. Let's just change the Lottie view to Lottie Plus view. There are some additional benefits because we now are using a UI view, so we can set a frame. So let's change the animation to a polite chicken, and I'm going to remove the scale effect entirely. And we see now that it fits exactly within our view. No resizing required, because the default setting we have set for our Lottie Plus content mode is Scale Aspect Fit. I can add some padding. And now we get some distance from the side when our view animates. If I want it smaller, I can specify a particular frame size. So for example, we could replace the padding with a frame that specifies a width of 250. Well, with Lottie 4 being much more efficient, I'm really inclined now to include it much more in my applications going forward. And I hope that this video has helped you understand how you can implement it. And as you see, you really only now need that Lottie Plus view, as it will meet your needs with all of our options. If you like this video and want to see more, please tap the thumbs up button and leave me a comment. And make sure you subscribe to my channel to get notified of all new videos. Thanks for watching.